Hey guys, in this video we're covering the mirror modifier. Quick reminder, this lesson is from our complete Intro to Blender course that we're offering for free for a limited time on YouTube. If you're new here, I'd recommend starting at the beginning of the course. I've added a link in the description. All right, go ahead and open up Blender and let's jump right in. To begin this lesson, let's start a new file. So go up to your File menu option and pick New, General. I've already done so I'll hit the Escape. And there's no need to save the file you were working on. And in this lesson, we're going to discuss the mirror modifier. So the mirror modifier is great when you want to build a symmetrical object, and we'll see how that works. So we have the default cube here. On over to the right, click on the wrench icon for the modifier properties. Then click on Add Modifier, and in the Generate column, scroll down to where it says Mirror and go ahead and click on it. And at first, it seems like nothing has happened. The mirror modifier, by default, will mirror the object about the origin. And the origin, as we know, is right in the center of this cube. So while the mirror modifier is working, it's as if the mirror is right upon itself. So we're going to need to move that origin point to see this work. There are a few ways to do that, but let's just use the 3D cursor to help us out. So hover your cursor near the bottom right corner here of this cube, hold down your Shift key and right click, and that will move the 3D cursor there. Then you can let go of the Shift key. We're not too worried about the 3D cursor being in an exact place right now. Just anywhere to the side is fine. Then come up to your menu here where it says Object and click on it. Then go to Set Origin and let's set it Origin to 3D cursor. Go ahead and click. And that origin moved and something kind of happened there. Now, let's say that we wanted this cube to be mirrored over here. Back over in the mirror modifier, we see axis, and right now it's mirroring in the x-axis direction. And so this can be confusing. If you thought to yourself, I want this object to be mirrored on this side so that any changes I made to the right side of this object appeared to be made to the left side of the mirrored object. You might think to yourself, oh, it seems like the x-axis here could be the mirror axis that this is going to go on the other side of. But the better way to think of it is the direction the axes are traveling. So if you think about, I want the mirror to go on this side of the cube, then I want it to go in the y direction. So go over to where it says axis and click on X to toggle that off, and then click on Y, and you'll see now that if you orbit around, depending on where your 3D cursor was, and you moved your origin there, now the mirror is happening in the Y direction on that side. So now let's see how this works. Press Tab to switch to edit mode. You can only edit the original object, not the mirrored one, but then anything you do to this object will happen to this in a mirrored fashion. So let's try it out. Click once in white space, then click once on this outside corner vertex, press G for grab, and just start moving it around, and you'll see that the opposite top corner vertex is being edited on the other side. You can go ahead and click to set this down. So that's what mirroring is. It's mirroring about this side such that the opposite side will happen in the opposite direction. Now you can have more than one mirror axis. So right now, if we think about this as being a symmetrical object where we cut it in half, we build half on one side and it automatically replicates on the other. So sometimes the symmetry is along a midline here and we need the other half. Sometimes, go ahead and come over to the mirror axis and toggle on the Z axis, leave the Y turned on, and if you orbit, these objects are overlapping a bit based off of where the 3D cursor was, but now we're still in edit mode. Press G for grab, and now notice that we are moving those vertices and they're mirroring in two directions now. So in this case, enabling two axes allows us to only model 1/4 of the object and then have the rest work out. Now if you orbit around, and let's make sure that we move this 3D cursor out here a bit. So go ahead and hold Shift and right click out here a bit just so that it's far away on this side. And then let's go Tab to switch back to object mode, and then go up to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D cursor. That will move things just a little bit. But now go back over to the mirror modifier and check on the x-axis. And again, now, if you tab to get back to edit mode, and you press G to move that vertex, now, instead of modeling 1/4, now we're modeling 1/8 of whatever this is. You can go ahead and click to set that down. So you can pick one axis, two axes, or all three, and that allows you to model objects that are either symmetrical in half, in a quarter, or in an eighth. Now for right now, let's go ahead and toggle off the x-axis and toggle off the z-axis, and we're left with just the y-axis again. And let's take a look at another setting of the mirror modifier. So we should be in edit mode right now. If you're not, you can tab to get to edit mode. That caused me to go back to object mode, so I'll tab again. And in edit mode, we should have this vertex selected on the outside here. Press G for grab, then press Y for the Y direction, and I want you to move back towards the mirrored object, and notice that you can cross right through. So this could be something you want, but in most cases, it's not going to be what you want. You wouldn't have the object crossing over itself. So come back over here and click to set this down. If you want that behavior, great, it's working as you wanted. But if you don't, if you'd like for wherever that mirror plane is, if you'd like for this to be restricted such that it couldn't pass through it, then over in your mirror modifier, notice that there's this clipping checkbox. Go ahead and check it on. Now go back over and press G for grab and then Y to lock the Y direction. And notice now that you're only able to go to the point where these would basically be touching because they're both hitting that mirror and they can't go past that. So that's helpful to have clipping turned on when you really think the object shouldn't cross over itself. We can go ahead and click to set that down.
Hey everyone, we're doing something a little unconventional here, and for a limited time, we're giving you access to one of our paid courses for free right here on YouTube, and this lesson is a part of it. Blender is a beast of a program to learn, but with the right approach, it doesn't have to be. That's why we created Blender Academy, to help people build the Blender skills they need and then go out and get the jobs they want. We hope you find these lessons to be a good investment of your time. If you do, and you're serious about learning Blender, head over to our website and continue learning with us. Thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe, and now, back to the lesson.
Okay, here's another thing that's helpful. So far, we've been moving the origin, but we're moving the origin for the object. And as we know from previous lessons, there are things that when we do them to the object will now go about that origin point. For example, rotating it, scaling it, and so on. And there will be times where you'll want to leave the object origin alone, but you'll want to figure out how to determine the mirroring plane more directly. So there's another way you can do this. Let's press Tab to go back to object mode. And on the right-hand side in the Y direction of our object, we're going to add a new object. So press Shift A, and we're going to add an empty. So go down to the empty category and click on plane axes. Then press G for grab, and let's move the plane axes over where we can see them. And we don't need to put these in an exact location, but so that they're not floating down here, let's go ahead and press G for grab, then Z to move them up in the Z direction, click, then G for grab, and X to move them over in this direction, click. We just want to clearly see that they're just to the side of this cube in some fashion. Okay, so let's say that that was going to be our mirroring plane, or our object about which we wanted this to mirror. So we wanted this to be mirrored on this side over here. So instead of having to rely on moving the origin around, we can actually add an object and then tell the mirror modifier to use it. So click on your object to select it. It looks like it's selecting both. That's because we really only have one object and it's being mirrored. Then over in your mirror modifier, notice this mirror object here. You have an eyedropper. Go ahead and click on it. And then you can come over and hover over the empty object and click on it. And now it's mirroring about that empty object. Remember, we had the y-axis toggled on, so it knew to be right there. Now what's great is the mirroring will work just the same. So press Tab and then press G and begin moving around that vertex, and it's working the same. Go ahead and click to set that down. But the other cool thing, press Tab and then come over to your empty object, click to select it. The other cool thing is that you can press G and move this around, And notice that how the object mirrors will change as well. So obviously if I slide this closer and click to set it down, this object is closer to the mirror, so the mirrored object would have to be closer, so that kind of shrunk the distance there. And you could play around with moving things around and getting it just right. Now, if an empty object, which is helpful because it's empty, so you don't really think of it as part of your modeling, but if an empty object is kind of hard for you to work with visually, here's another idea. Let's go ahead and delete the empty object. So with it selected, hold down Shift and the letter X, and then press Enter to delete it. The mirroring will now go back to being about the origin. Then let's add a new mesh. So hold down the Shift key and press the letter A for the Add menu. And go up to Mesh, and we could pick anything, but let's go with Circle. So click on Circle. Now the circle is in there somewhere, but it's small, so press S to switch to the scale tool, then move your cursor up so it's nice and big, and click to set that down. The circle doesn't have a face, it's just the edge, that's fine. Then press R for rotate, and press X to lock the X-axis direction, so now you're rotating about that axis. And as you start rotating down, go ahead and press 90 on your keyboard. That's the top number keys, 90. And then press Enter, and that will rotate it up 90 degrees. Then let's grab this and move it over in the Y direction. So press G for grab and Y to lock the Y direction, and let's move it over and click to set it down. Now remember, whenever we make transformations at the object level, we'll often want to apply those transformations. So let's go ahead with that circle selected, hold down Control and press the letter A. Now I had mentioned previously that we like to use all transforms, but don't do that here. So if you notice, there's an origin for this circle, and this origin is based off of its location, so where we moved it to. If we were to reset the location, this origin would jump back over here to the 3D cursor, and then we would have a little bit of an issue with the way the mirroring worked. So all we really need to apply is the rotation, and it doesn't hurt to apply the scale. We just don't want to do the location. So back over here, Control A to bring that back up. And I'm gonna do rotation and scale. Go ahead and click on that. Come back over to the mirror modifier, click on the eyedropper, then come over to the circle and click on it. And now that cube, or whatever shape it's become, is being mirrored about this particular shape. And one thing that's cool here is, even though there's no face here, you could kind of think of it like this is a physical mirror. And so as you sort of think about how it would mirror itself, it might be more obvious than with an empty axis. So again, if you click to select this particular circle, press G for grab, press Y, you can sort of sense like, okay, the mirror is quite close. So of course they're gonna be close. It's a little further, so they're gonna be further. Also, I'll click to set that down. You could press R for rotate and then X, and then begin rotating this. And now you can see as you're rotating this, I'll go ahead and click to set it down somewhere. You can see a little bit better, okay, if the mirror is angled like this, then this object reflecting here would reflect this way here. So it might make more sense to you how the mirroring is working when you get into more complicated types of mirroring problems. Okay, so we have a bit of an idea of how the mirror modifier works. In general, we're using it when we want to create symmetrical objects. Let's just do one quick practice together on something a little more realistic so we can get a sense for how this would work. So go up to your File menu and pick the option for New, General. There's no need to save the file you've been working on. And in this new file, let's delete the default cube, Shift X, press Enter to delete it, Shift A, and we're gonna add a new mesh, and we're gonna go down to where it says monkey. Go ahead and add the monkey mesh. And if you scroll your mouse wheel forward and orbit around a bit, you see that this is a very low poly monkey that comes along with Blender with the other meshes. Now this might go without saying, but if you press Tab to switch to edit mode, click once in space to deselect everything. If you wanted to say adjust something about the ear over here, you think it's sticking too far out, and you wanted it to adjust to the other side, well, this mesh, the way it's set up right now, any edits you make to the right-hand side aren't gonna be reflected on the left. So just to double check that, this is going to be not very nice looking, but you can just go ahead and click to drag a selection around some of the vertices on that right-hand side. You won't get the ones in the back. That's okay. Press G for grab. And as you move it around, you can see that ear on the other side is not being adjusted. So go ahead and hit escape and click once in space to deselect everything. So let's do this. On your number pad on the right-hand side of your screen, press the number 1. And that will switch you to a face-on view. You notice if you need to use the gizmo up here, if you click the -Y, that's what you're looking at there. Then let's go up and switch to wireframe mode. That also toggles on X-ray, which we'll need toggled on. Then I want you to click to drag a selection window that's just to the left of this midline of vertices and edges here. So from about here, click and drag a selection window all the way across everything on the right-hand side. Now, I got a little bit too much, so I'm gonna roll my mouse wheel in. Notice I got one vertex that was to the side here and one here. That's not gonna cut it. So let me do that again. I'll click in space to deselect, I'll zoom in a bit, and I need to get real close here, right up and tight like this. And click to drag a selection window around everything. And now if I look real quick, I didn't get any of these nearby vertices. I don't want any of those. Then press the letter X to bring up the delete menu. And even though we're in vertex selection mode, we want to delete the faces. Go ahead and click faces. That leaves behind these vertices that we selected. So we just wanted all the faces on the right. Now you can toggle back on the solid mode shading and orbit into 3D, and you have half of the monkey. Then press Tab to get back to object mode. And let's add a mirror modifier. So back over on the right-hand side, click on the wrench, then drop down the Add Modifier menu, and under Generate, scroll down to where it says Mirror, and click to add the mirror modifier. Now it immediately worked because that origin point was right in the middle of where that entire object had been. So by us cutting it in half and then mirroring it, it already knew exactly what to do. If for any reason your axis was defaulting to the Y and not the X, you might have had something weird like this. Just make sure that you click on X and then undo the other two. You don't want the Y or Z toggled on. Then let's also remember that it's a good idea when you don't want anything to mess up through the plane of mirroring to check on the clipping option here. And now let's check out how we can edit this monkey. So go ahead and press Tab to get back to edit mode. Orbit around so that you can actually see this ear over here. Let's say we want to bring the ear in a bit. And in order to do this in a nice way, we're going to need to use proportional editing. First though, let's select a little bit of it. So let's come back up to wireframe mode. And then over here, let's click and drag a selection window around some of the outside of the ear. Maybe not very much, just this much here. It doesn't matter if you have the exact same selection as me. Just an outside set of vertices will do fine. Then you can switch back to solid view mode. Then let's turn on proportional editing. Click on that there. Now let's orbit a bit so we can actually see what's going on the other side at the same time. And press G for grab. Press X to lock the X direction. And notice now that the other side is moving in at the same time. You can also roll your mouse wheel forward and backward to see how that can change a little bit of the rest of the face and how it's adjusting. So play around with that a little bit and then click to finish that move there. And from here, you can play around a bit. You could click on this top vertex and decide that you want to move that, G for grab, and you want to move that up a bit. And notice it can't go any further in, but because you're proportionally editing, the other stuff can adjust. So you can roll your mouse wheel to adjust less of the other stuff. It's up to you, but play around with making the head a little taller or a little flatter. I'll go with taller and click to set that down and orbit around to check out what you've done. So this is a really common workflow if you're character modeling, but it's also common if you're creating hard surface models of anything that is symmetrical to model half and then use the mirror modifier to allow all of your edits on one side to be symmetrical on the other. As with all the modifiers, there are some other options here, but I find the ones that we've covered to be a majority of what you'll need to use with the mirror modifier. And if we get to examples down the line where we need to do something more complicated, We'll cover those other options then. But for now, you know what you need to know about the mirror modifier. Go ahead and experiment. Try it out on some of your own symmetrical objects. Look around your desk or around your home or your office and see if there's anything that you could practice using the mirror modifier to create. And then when you've ingrained that and practiced, you're ready to move on to the next lesson.
Congratulations, you made it through the lesson. Did you find this video to be helpful? Let us know by giving it a like. If you're ready for the next lesson, you can find it in this playlist. And if you're interested in learning more about how we can help you build the skills you need, head over to blenderacademy.com. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, happy blending!